There is a hidden room on the Astro Megaship, and for 2 whole years, there is a body inside it. Not a prop, not a weapon, a person. A teenage boy sealed inside a cryogenic tube, frozen somewhere between alive and gone, because the alternative was watching him die. And there's one guy on that ship who knows he's down there. Who keeps the machine running and just waits for 2 years for any sign, any flicker that his best friend might come back to him? That's how you get a Power Ranger. That is the actual origin story of one of them. Not a lightning bolt, not a chosen one prophecy. A kid who threw his own body in front of a monster to save the person he loved most, and nearly died doing it, and then slept through 2 years of a war he never got to fight. His name is Zhane. And I genuinely think he might be the most quietly heartbreaking Ranger the franchise has ever made. So today, let's talk about the Ranger who should have died. Okay, quick ground floor for anybody who wasn't glued to this one. Zhane comes from a show called Power Rangers in Space. That's the 6th season. It aired in 1998. And honestly, it's one of the best things this franchise ever did. It's the season that finally sent the Rangers off Earth, out into deep space, to fight an entire alliance of evil. Zhane is played by an actor named Justin Nimmo, and he is what fans call a 6th Ranger, the extra one, the bonus hero who shows up after the main team's already rolling. Tommy was the original. Zhane is the one nobody talks about, and I want to fix that today, because his story is rough. But before we go any deeper, I have to ask you something, and I actually want you to answer this one. This whole video is me going to bat for a Ranger I think got completely overlooked. So I want to know yours. Who is your most underrated Power Ranger? Not the obvious fan favorites. Not Tommy, not Jason. I mean the one nobody ever brings up. The one you defend in an argument. The deep cut that you think deserved way more love than they ever got. Drop that name in the comments. Tell me why. Be specific. Because I am reading them, and I will genuinely cover the best ones on this channel. That's a promise. Okay, back to Zhane. So, to understand why his story hit so hard, you have to start where he started. A planet called KO-35. KO-35 is a human space colony. And this is where Zhane grew up, alongside 2 other kids, a boy named Andros and Andros' little sister, Karone. Remember that name, Karone. It matters more than you can possibly imagine right now. All 3 of these kids were special. They were born with telekinesis. They could move things with their minds. But out of all of them, the bond that mattered was Zhane and Andros. Because here's the thing about Andros. If you've seen the show, you know Andros is intense. He's the brooding, serious, weight-of-the-world Red Ranger. The guy carries so much. And Zhane? Zhane was the one person who could crack that. The wiki puts it perfectly. Zhane was, at times, the only one who could make Andros smile or laugh. That's who he was to him. Not a sidekick. The one person who could reach him. And when the 2 of them became Power Rangers together, defending their home, for both of these kids, that was a dream come true. 2 best friends, telekinetic, in matching armor, protecting the colony they grew up on. You could not draw it up any better than that. And then, it all goes wrong. Because KO-35 is under attack. The great evil of this whole saga, a monster called Dark Specter, is throwing everything he has at the colony. Attack after attack after attack. And in the middle of one of these battles, Zhane looks over, and he sees Andros in trouble. Andros is locked up fighting a monster, and there's an attack coming, and Andros doesn't see it. And here's the line that gets me, near enough word for word from how it's told. Without a second thought for himself, Zhane leapt in front of Andros and took the attack meant for him. He saved his best friend's life, and it left him mortally wounded. Sit in that for a second. There was no hesitation, no calculation. He saw the person he loved most about to die, and his entire body just moved. He took a blow that was supposed to kill Andros, and it nearly killed him instead. And now, Andros is holding his dying best friend, and he can't fix it. The wounds are too severe. There is no hospital, no medic, nothing that can save him. So Andros does the only thing he can think of. He puts Zhane into a cryogenic tube, basically a deep freeze, and he hides it in a secret compartment inside the Astro Megaship. Not to bury him, to pause him, to stop him from dying, and hold him there and hope that someday, somehow, there's a way to bring him back. And then he waits for 2 whole years. 2 years, Andros keeps that tube running. 2 years he watches over his frozen friend, checking for any sign of life, any hint that Zhane might wake up. And the whole time, the war is getting worse. The colony falls apart. Andros ends up out in deep space, alone, hunting for his lost sister, carrying this secret the entire time, that his best friend is frozen in the back of the ship, and it's his fault Zhane got hurt in the first place. Every single episode of Early in Space, that tube is just there. A ticking clock nobody knows about but him. So how does Zhane come back? Almost by accident. The megaship crash lands on a planet called Cadix, they get jumped by scavengers, and in the chaos, Zhane's life support briefly fails. And that failure, that near death again, is what finally jolts him awake. After 2 years frozen, the Silver Ranger opens his eyes and steps straight into a war that's been raging the entire time he was gone. That's his introduction, an episode literally called Survival of the Silver. And here's where the show does something so smart. Because you'd expect the guy who just woke up from a 2-year coma to be rusty, fragile, behind. Nope, Zhane comes out of that freezer and is immediately the most dangerous ranger on the board. I'm not exaggerating. Early on, he goes up against Ecliptor, one of the season's heaviest hitters, a villain the other 5 rangers struggled to beat even when they teamed up on him. By himself. The thing all 5 of them together couldn't do, he does solo. Fresh out of a coma. And that's kind of his whole deal. Zhane is a one-man army. He's got his own personal morpher, his own weapon, his own ride, a motorcycle called the Silver Cycle that transforms into a flying glider when the chase heads for the sky. He doesn't need the team to power up. He can morph on his own, roll in on his own, wreck everything, and roll back out. He's got his own giant Zord too, the Mega Winger, separate from the big combining machine the other 5 pile into. He is the definition of a lone wolf who does not need backup. Which, okay, on the surface, that sounds awesome, right? Unkillable cool guy, shows up, saves the day, leaves. But here's the twist the show hits you with, and this is the part I love. Being frozen for 2 years came with a price. Because in the middle of battles, Zhane's powers start failing, randomly. He'll be fighting, morphed, and suddenly his suit just gives out, and he demorphs in the middle of a fight, totally exposed. And at first, even he doesn't know why. He thinks something's seriously wrong with him. The other rangers actually overhear part of it and jump to the worst conclusion. They think he's dying all over again. And the real reason is so poetically cruel. It turns out his powers had been slowly leaking, because he stayed in his morphed form for 2 years while he was frozen in that tube. Think about that. The thing Andros did to save his life, freezing him mid-fight, still powered up, is the exact thing that's now draining the powers right out of him. He has to physically go recharge himself, using the raw energy of an electric storm just to keep being a ranger. His sacrifice literally followed him out of the ice. He paid for those 2 years twice. And then, because this show apparently decided one tragic arc wasn't enough, they give him a love story. And it's a disaster. A beautiful, doomed disaster. So there's this villain, Astronema, the princess of evil, purple hair, the whole terrifying package. And one day, Zhane ends up saving her from one of her own monsters. He tends to her out in a marsh, they have this quiet moment, he gets her to try a roasted marshmallow, she smiles, and something clicks. Zhane falls for her. And the wild part is, she feels it too. The Silver Ranger and the Princess of Darkness, on opposite sides of the war, actually catching feelings for each other. And it does not go well. She sends him a note to meet her at a campfire, an actual date. Zhane races back to the ship. He's giddy, he's getting ready. And then, of course, he gets called into battle. By the time he finally makes it to her, he's late. And Astronema is furious. So furious that she blasts him, tells him she never wants to see him again. And Zhane just stands there, torched, heartbroken, demolished. He can't even explain to his own teammates that his heart just got broken by the enemy. But here's the gut punch under the gut punch. Remember Karone, Andros' little sister, from the very beginning? Astronema is Karone. Andros' sister was kidnapped as a child and raised by the villains into the Princess of Evil. So the girl Zhane fell for, the enemy who broke his heart, is his best friend's stolen little sister. The same sister Andros has been tearing across the galaxy, trying to find. Zhane didn't just fall for the enemy. He fell for the one person Andros was looking for the whole time. And, knowing that, look at how Zhane keeps choosing. He and Andros eventually find survivors from KO-35, rebels hiding out from Dark Specter. And Zhane, the guy who already gave his life once for this cause, volunteers to stay behind and fight with them, leaving the team a man short, just because they needed the help more than he needed to be a hero on the flagship. That's who he is. He shows up when it's the hardest, and he leaves when someone else needs him more. And that's what I think everybody gets wrong about Zhane. On a first watch, he reads as the cocky one, the show-off, the lone wolf pretty boy, who swaggers in with a motorcycle. But that's not the guy underneath. The guy underneath already threw his body in front of a killing blow before this show even started. He already spent 2 years dead in all but name. Everything he does after that, the jokes, the swagger, the solo missions, that's a kid who already paid the ultimate price once and got a second life he didn't expect to have. He's not showing off. He's just not afraid of much anymore, because the worst thing already happened to him. So here's my verdict. We talk about 6th Rangers all the time on this channel. The greens, the golds, the extra heroes, and everybody defaults to the same couple of names. But for my money, Zhane is the purest sacrifice story the whole franchise ever told. He's the Ranger who should have died, who traded 2 years of his life for 1 second of loyalty to his best friend, woke up into a war anyway, and just kept giving. No prophecy, no destiny, just love and a body that moved before the brain could argue. That's a hero. So now, I want to hear from you. Straight up, is Zhane the most underrated 6th Ranger in Power Rangers history? And if you think somebody deserves that crown more than him, tell me who, and make your case down in the comments, because I will be reading them. And do me a quick favor before you go. If you'd forgotten about Zhane, or you never even knew this was his story, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this stuff reach more people who grew up on this show. And subscribe, because I'm digging up the real story behind these characters, one forgotten hero at a time. A hidden room, a frozen kid, and 2 years of a best friend just waiting. Sit with that one.